My guest today is Casey Ervin, who is a man of many pursuits that range from being a cardiovascular perfusionist to a coach to even a pilot, all of which have earned him many accolades and honors. What I love most about Casey, though, is his willingness to be vulnerable and intimate with life. We hit some really deep moments in this podcast in a very raw and vulnerable look at death. And this conversation about death really touched my heart. It's a tough conversation. It's a very real conversation. Death is something that we've put behind a curtain in society, and we like to pretend like we have all of the time in the world. But thankfully, there are plenty of experiences in this life that can open our eyes to these facts if we're just willing to see them. This podcast is one such example. And as we're willing to see the reality of the world around us, we can start to make the most of life. This means connecting deeply with the people around us. Applying ourselves in ways that support others, whether that's participating in a community, sharing deeper vulnerability with a family member, or taking that next courageous step in what life is asking of us. We all have an opportunity in this present moment to stand hand in hand with life in a more intimate way. Because at its core, the fact of death is actually permission to live. It's the catalyst that really drives this point home that we only have a finite amount of time on this planet. And putting attention on how we spend that time is something that is precious and valuable to be reminded of often. So, without further ado, please enjoy this very, very intimate look at death on this episode of the Hard for Life podcast. You are listening to the Hard for Life podcast with Thomas Scott.
As you know, I'm a coach. My coaching business is certainly gaining traction. The amount of people that I'm reaching and the genuine positive feedback that I'm getting. I've been doing a lot of coaching for free just because in my heart of heart, I feel like it's the right thing to do. And showing up for people, the feedback that I've gotten from that has been tremendous. But, more so, it's the feeling in my heart that I get from that. It's that sense of purpose and fulfillment that I'm doing something for all the right reasons. That feels in alignment. And I think it's really hard to put a price tag on that. I know our time, our experience is valuable. It is worth something. But I tell you what, man, I love filling up other people's cups. I love using my brand of wisdom and experience to help someone else in their journey. For me, that's one of the highest of high feelings I could reach.
I resonate with that deeply. And for me, coaching is soul work as well. It's one of those things that I would die for it. And I know that because I've had instances in my past, not too long ago, like just a few months ago, where I was dealing with a health issue and it was so strong that I thought I was going to die in that moment. But I was like, well, I'm on a fucking coaching call. If I have a heart attack right here, because I had pain like right here. And I was like, it probably wasn't a heart attack, but my brain thought that it was. And because of that, a lot of fear came up, like fear at a 10. And I know that I'm in the right spot because that fear was at a 10 out of 10. And I was on a client call and I'm like, fuck it. I'm going to give this client every single bit I've got. And if I end up like kicking the bucket here on the call, I went out doing what I love. So it's wild to say that, but that is true. Like that moment happened for real for me. And it really galvanized for me what it means to be in purpose work, like to be filled up by work.
Ah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And that feels in alignment, right? That would almost be, dare I say, a blessing. Very few of us get to choose what we're doing when our time comes, right?
Yeah.
But God, given the opportunity, please let me be doing something I love, and serving a higher purpose. That would be worth it.
Yeah. This could be an interesting topic to go into, one that I feel a little shy and a little scared to go into, but it's present. So, you down to talk about the fear of death?
Yeah, let's do it, baby. Let's go.
Okay. I've had it a lot this past year. This year has been a absolute masterclass in sitting with the fear of death for me. And it's something that I imagine a lot of people avoid in their lives. I know I've avoided it in the past, and I'll use various addictions and things to hide from that when my body's telling me something or when fears are coming up. And I'm curious, have you had a moment where you have like been really afraid you're going to die?
I've had two moments that I thought that it was possible that I would die. I've been in growing up in the Midwest, so thunderstorms, tornadoes, things like that are not out of the ordinary. Except I was outside running one day, and where a tornado touched down, and I was close enough to, I remember a big gust of wind. There were branches and debris flying. I took shelter behind in someone's front yard behind bushes. And just for a split second, I remember thinking, God, please don't let this be it.
Yeah.
Please let me find a way out of this. It happened like a flash. I think I might have been in like high school at that age. At that age, like you feel like you're impervious, right? You're Superman. Nothing can touch me. I know everything. But even just for that split second, I remember thinking that. The second time was when COVID went around, the very first round of COVID, I got it really bad.
Wow.
To the point where I got really dehydrated. It lasted longer than I thought it would. A combination of symptoms. I got to the point where like I couldn't walk my dog anymore, and I started to get scared when I couldn't read. I remember having a magazine, a book in front of me, and thinking, I'm a smart guy. I don't know what those words mean. Like I literally can't read. And I remember thinking like, I'm kind of helpless right now. And like, I don't even know if I could call for help if I needed to. And I remember thinking like, it's a possibility that I could die here. People are dying all around us. Like, who says that I couldn't too?
Yeah.
And the irony part is I work in the medical field. But and that's kind of the same thoughts. We think we're impervious. I'm the one on the other side always helping people, and all of a sudden it's me. Both instances, and again, working in the medical field, I find this very interesting that whatever you believe in, even if you're an atheist, when we have that moment where like, hey, this might be it, we all call to a higher power, regardless of what you believe in. It is uniquely human, maybe. I don't know exactly what it is, but we all call to that higher power regardless of what I believe. And I think that is a very powerful instance in all of our lives. I'm curious if you kind of had that similar experience.
100%. 100%. Yeah, many times I've had, it's interesting. It's emotional for me to share this openly that I've had like 15 of these feelings of like, oh God, this might be it. Just in the past year, like this has happened a lot for me, like a lot.
Has your response changed? In being, let's say, experienced with it, right?
Yeah.
Each time that happens, what is the thought process? What is the feeling?
Yeah, I mean, at first it was that like go to, oh God, like please God, I don't want to die. I'm not ready yet. And the first time I had it was a couple of years back. I was about to go skydiving, and everything in my instincts were saying that this skydiving trip was going to be catastrophic. Like every single thing. And even a buddy of mine who was going to go with me, he called me. He's like, hey, I really feel like we're going to not survive this skydiving trip today. And I was like, wow. I've been feeling that for like a day and a half now. Like it's like we're not going to survive. And immediately what came up was like all of the unfinished business in my life, like the first time that happened, and everybody that I needed to talk to and close out with. So I sent like I love yous to like everybody that I needed to clear that with. And it's actually, I want to back up even a little bit further. The first time that I really felt like I died was on Bufo. I took Bufo alvarius, which I did an episode about that. It's DMT. Mm-hmm. And during that, I woke up in the middle of the experience and kind of like I died. And it was so real that I feel like I have a sensorial experience of death. Like, it was one of those, like, people who go through near-death experiences talk about that, where they'll, like, leave their body and see it from a, different perspective and things like that. I had a similar type experience while on this psychedelic. And so coming back, I already had this vision of my death, so to speak. And then fast forward back to the skydiving, everything that I had not cleared from Bufo until that time came up. It was like, oh, I have unresolved things I need to share with my parents or my loved ones. I have unresolved things that, like, I have some shit I need to clear out. I go so vulnerable on this damn podcast. I was a photographer for many, many years. And like, I would shoot, I did nude photography. That wasn't a secret, but for like 10 years I did nude photography, and I had all of these hard drives that had like thousands and thousands of past photo shoots on them. Not thousands of photo shoots. I think I had like 500 photo shoots. And I was like, fuck, if I die, I don't know what's going to happen to those. Those could, like, who knows what could happen to that. And I would feel terrible if my past clients got their photos leaked online. And so I ended up destroying all of my hard drives, like crushed them, sent them through a compactor, and then put them in the dump. And that's an example of some of the things that I just like started to clean up when I had that first experience. So I'll keep sharing about future experiences, like the next experiences, but I want to pause there and see what comes up for you. When you had your fear of dying, did any of that come up for you?
I think, the thought, I think for me is, what have I not accomplished yet? All the things we think we have so much time, right? Yeah. We think we're never going to die. And I agree, we should live life to the fullest, right? But we all walk around with this timer, on the back of our head that none of us can see, right? So I guess in both instances, it was a reminder that, all we have, any of us, all we have is this moment.
Yep.
The past is the past. We can't do anything about that. Tomorrow is not promised. All we have is this moment. So can you make this moment count? How are you going to make this count? It's kind of a credo to live your life, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of changed my perspective. Now, I get caught up in the hoopla and everything else, the busyness of society, just like everyone else does. I'm not impervious to that. But, it's conversations like this that remind me that, make it count. Whatever that means to you, make it count. Make today count.
It's really beautiful that you're going in this direction with it, because in future, like in the next round of those moments where I really thought I was going to die. By the way, I didn't die skydiving. I didn't end up going. What was really fucking crazy is we showed up and they grounded the planes due to bad weather. And so like we didn't end up actually getting to go. And that was kind of cool, and also crazy synchronicity type thing where it was like, oh wow, we're guided and safe in what we do. But a couple of the future ones were really around a gut issue that came up from what I found out now is a parasite, but I didn't know at the time, for like 2 years. And I had spent a lot of time traveling around Mexico, and in particular, I went to this place called Sayulita and was eating street tacos every day for like 2 weeks straight. Like that was it. They had these little shitty tiendas and no grocery stores. And the tiendas would have like room temperature eggs, which I guess is fine, but there's not even an expiration date on some of these things. And like you just go and grab vegetables, eggs, you name it, from a little hole in the wall that stinks like cat shit, because they'd have like 5 cats running around just crapping on the floor. Like it was a mess. It was not a safe place to get food or water. But anyway, so I'm eating street tacos there in this place, like 2 to 3 meals a day for like 2 weeks. And I left and like my gut was just like, no. And I didn't know what it was. I thought it was just I'd eaten some bad street tacos. And so I was like, oh, it'll be fine. And a couple of months later, I started eating my normal everyday foods. And at one moment I ate peanuts, which I've eaten peanuts my entire life. I was eating peanuts in Mexico, and one night I was eating peanuts, and all of a sudden, like, I ate them, and like my throat started tightening up. I started feeling like tingling in my fingers. My chest got really tight. And I'm like, oh fuck, I think I'm having an allergic reaction. So like I called my mom, and I'm like, can you have an allergic reaction to something that you've never had an allergic reaction to before? And she's like, oh yeah. And I was like, holy shit, I think I'm having an allergic reaction. She's like, stay calm, everything's good. And from that moment forward, every food I ate was giving me that reaction in my body.
Wow.
And I didn't tell anybody about it at all. I was like, I'm going to figure this shit out. I went the spiritual woo-woo route because at the time, my trust in doctors is at the lowest it has ever been. And I imagine a lot of people have that. You know, this is one of the things that would be interesting to get into, is talking about, especially because you're in the medical field, the lies and shit that happened during COVID fucked people's trust in the medical system.
Yep.
And that is hugely damaging, because now you have individuals like me where I'm like, I want to go to a doctor, but I don't fucking trust them at all because they weren't telling the truth half the time. And, or if they were telling the truth, it was a lie that was fed to them that they didn't have the presence of mind to question. So I didn't go figure this shit out. I was just winging it on my own, which is terrifying. And I went to Tulum, and on that flight, I had gotten down to drinking water. I was doing a water fast because I was like, literally anything I consume at this point was having a full reaction in my body where like it was pain, it was tightening, all of that. So I'm drinking water, and even water was causing that reaction. And I like land in Tulum, have told nobody what's going on. And I was like, well, I guess I'm going to fucking die here in Tulum. And the next thing I ate was a cucumber that night, trying to just like anything at all. I was like, a fucking raw cucumber. Let me try that. Literally my whole body just like tightened up, and I was like, oh, this is it. And I laid down in bed, ready to die right there.
Wow.
On that spot. Like, it was that strong. Like, it was that intense of an experience in my body. And fuck, that did not go away for quite some time. Like, I, of course, survived that experience, but it didn't feel good at all. And it was really just a moment of like, give it to God. And I just, like, I fully surrendered into death at that moment. And I had to do that like many more times with food until I found like a something sustainable for myself. And it wasn't until 2 years later that I found out that this was a parasite. It's fucking crazy. But like, you go to the doctor and you tell them the symptoms, and they're like, oh, you've got colitis, or like you've got pancreatic cancer or some shit like that. It's not like, hey, let's test for a parasite. You were in Mexico.
Yeah, the funny thing with medicine is everything's just kind of a Band-Aid. Doctors will treat the symptom because that's how they're classically trained to, but they do a very poor job at treating the source. And let's dive into that topic, but I have two questions for you first. Mm-hmm. A, how did you resolve your symptoms?
Naturopath. I found a naturopath 2 years later. So I resolved it by doing a lot of emotional work, and I found so many like emotional things come through, but diet. So I cut all processed foods out 100%. Mm-hmm. 100%. I got down to just grass-fed steak, organic fruit, some raw dairy, some raw honey. Like, that was it. And that's all I was eating for 2 years. And then it wasn't enough to like, it was enough to keep me stable, but it wasn't enough to resolve it. And finally, the chronicness of my condition hit a point where, like, even with that, pain was coming in at a 10. And I was like, I don't know what to do. And I got the ping to check a naturopath. Went to the naturopath, and he's like, oh, yeah. You were traveled? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, let's get you on a parasite cleanse first, and we'll see what happens.
Boom.
Cleaned it right up.
Yeah. I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah. Before you go into yours, I would love for you to give a little bit of context on your medical background so that people know who they're listening to.
Sure. I'm classically trained as a cardiovascular perfusionist. So I work in heart surgery. The specific details of that, I'm the guy that runs the heart-lung machine in surgery. So in heart surgery, there's a triad between the surgeon, the anesthesiologist, and the perfusionist. So really, it's my job to keep the patient alive during the actual heart surgery part of heart surgery. I take over your bodily functions, your cardiac output, your pulmonary function, kidneys, pH, temperature, electrolytes, literally all of your body functions I'm in control of as the surgeon is operating, stopping, starting your heart, et cetera, et cetera. So my background, classic medical training.
Yeah.
Let's go into that. I would like to talk about modern medicine and my thoughts on it. I have a feeling that you and I are very aligned. I want to ask one question first, though, to finish off our topic on death, if you will.
Yeah.
Given these experiences, are you more afraid, less afraid, or no change of death?
Less afraid now, for sure.
Why?
But it took a breaking point. It took like a build till it got. Right before I had gone to the naturopath and found a resolution to this, I had hit a point where people don't talk about this. I fucking hate talking about this kind of thing. It's TMI, but it's also like people need to know. Like I had been constipated for like a month, to the point where like I hadn't had a movement in 1 month. You read online, if that's the case, you should be going to the hospital immediately. Mm-hmm. And I was having pain and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm like, this is fucking miserable. I was trying coffee enemas and laxatives and everything, and nothing was working for me. And I was like, oh my God, this is it. And I was like, I don't know what to do here. I went to a doctor, and he was like, he could not have gotten, like I went to the walk-in clinic, and this doctor could not have gotten me out of the clinic fast enough. He was just like, tell me your symptoms. And I'm like, this. And he's like, okay, here you go. Goodbye. Like we talked for, I swear, 3 minutes. Something I've been dealing with for 2 years. This guy gave me a prescription after 3 minutes. I couldn't, like for me, I'm like, that's not good enough. That is not fucking good enough. I was so angry because I'm like, it took me this much courage to walk into this fucking place. Then I do. And the doctor could not get me out fast enough without really any idea of what's going on. And so I still went and got his prescription, took it. It didn't do shit. And at that point, I was like, I guess, like, another round of this, like, I'm going to fucking die. And it hit so hard that I called my best friend, and I just started sobbing. And I had not done that yet. And, like, he held the best space I have ever experienced a man holding space for. Shout out to Soleil Rad, who I have done a podcast with. The man is next level, and he really knows how to allow people to process emotions, and it was really beautiful. And so once I processed that fear, it really, really like alleviated this fear of death to a high degree. Like that particular one, when that snapped, so he held space, I grieved it really hard, and it got to this like, and then it kind of like popped. And when that happened, it really lessened the fear significantly. Like it was a big, big dip. So I still have shit I want to do in my life, but it's not as afraid anymore.
Yeah, you're not fearless per se. Yeah. But you're just more. Is more accepting a better term for it?
Yeah, for sure. And I just over the weekend, my grandpa passed away, and I experienced that as well. And like seeing him in his casket and the peace he was in, like his body was just in such peace. It was like, oh wow, it's kind of a beautiful thing.
Why do you think society places such a negative connotation on death?
That's a great question. Well, it kind of speaks to the individualistic nature of society. We all feel like we have this one life and then that's it. It's done. And even if you're religious and you believe in heaven, you're not coming back, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And I think those of us who buy into the idea that this is not a one and done game, reincarnation, so to speak, it's much easier to accept death because you're like, this is just another facet of the game that I'm playing right now. I like to think of it as a video game. And with video games, you have lots of different lives, or you can play different characters. Your consciousness stays the same. That's immortal. That's unchanging. Mm-hmm. Your soul is what I've heard some people call it. Yeah. But others, I think, are really attached to their own ego identity. And
Yeah.
if your ego identity is like, I am Scott Hansen, and once I go, that's it. I'm never going to experience this again. Okay. Like, that's where I think a lot of people's fear or attachment comes from. But what about you? I'm curious what your perspective is on it.
Well, I'm kind of pondering this as we're talking about this. So part of me, there's still more I want to do in my life. And quite honestly, like, I don't think I'm ready to say goodbye to my loved ones. I believe I have more love to give, greater love to give. And as I develop in my own healing, in my own journey, that love gets greater. And I really want to share and express that with not only my family, but guys like you, my coaching clients out there, and people whom I haven't even met yet, that I would like to express my love to at some point in time. But is death a bad thing? Like, I don't know. It's obviously totally normal in life and nature. Like, it's a guaranteed that everything is going to die at some point in time. Nature dies every season per se, right?
Yeah.
And it's just part of the process. It's also, death is the first step in rebirth.
100%.
And that's a very important facet of life. And then I'm trying to think, well, I have not physically died, but I put a death to a lot of old patterns and habits and some of my ego and the things that haven't served me. And thank God I've done that, because I'm a much better man today than I might not have been had I not done that, right? So it's a very interesting concept. I'm sure we could have a whole dissertation on death, but it's interesting.
Let's keep digging in, because one of the things you brought up that I thought was really beautiful was this idea of what a timeline allows us to do. So I think it's, you asked, am I more afraid or less afraid of death now? And I actually find that to be slightly irrelevant. What it has given me is less of a fear to be intimate with others, which is something that I had some of the deepest fear around. So
that's huge. That's huge.
Yeah. Like, to me, the biggest gift from it is the permission to actually live, because so many people are more afraid to live than they are to die. And so how I experience living, when people say, you want to live a really full life, I imagine for me, that was like, okay, what's a full life? Like, what's really being alive? It's like adrenaline. And that's not the truth. Really being alive isn't skydiving or going and racing cars. You can experience life from that. Really being alive is challenging yourself to be emotionally courageous and intimate and vulnerable in ways that you've never been before with those around you, allowing you to really connect deeper. Because one of the things I realized is that I was actually not afraid to die for most of my life growing up. I was actually like, oh, I'm not afraid to die at all. And I found after Bufo that the reason for that was because I wasn't allowing myself to truly love anybody. I was not actually close to anyone. So of course I was not afraid to go, because I wasn't going to miss anybody and no one was going to miss me. And the deeper I allow myself to create real intimacy, knowing it's going to end, knowing that the deeper I love my fiance, the deeper I love my parents, the deeper I love myself, the harder I will grieve when they go. That is the courage and the true intimacy in life that I'm finding through this process.
So do you think that perspective of death allowed you to find more meaning in life? Because my next question was, what do you think life's all about then? But I think you just answered it.
I think I did too. I think that is the meaning of life, is it's about the relationships. I've been on a hunt for a lot of time, and I've even had many guests on this podcast that talk about the money and accomplishment is not the meaning. That's not it. It's about the relationships we create.
100%. I totally support that.
When the theme of this podcast is learning to become profoundly intimate with life from the most radical people on the planet. To me, the most radical people on the planet are the ones that allow themselves the deepest depth of intimacy.
Yeah.
Intimacy with ourselves, intimacy with our shame, intimacy with our with other people, intimacy with our experience of life, like allowing ourselves to feel it all the way.
I feel like in that deepness of intimacy that we get to touch our essence, our souls, and the souls of the others around us. And that is life.
It's the real juice, but it's scary. Like, and what I'm wondering, I'll drop a question to you. Well, first I'll ask, have you found yourself feeling scared of connecting intimately with people?
Oh, God, yes. I let me be very honest. It's something I'm still working on.
Same.
It's been just on this healing journey that I've been on over the course of 2 years. That's allowed me to kind of turn that around. It took massive heartbreak, and some depression and some really tough times, to look in the mirror and realize that, not only was I not allowing myself to love anyone else or anyone else get close to me, I wasn't loving myself. I didn't know how to love myself. My ego would say, well, Casey, do you love yourself? Well, fucking, of course I do. Well, yeah, I love myself. What kind of question is that? But look how defensive that posture is, right? So in that, I realized that not only was I had fear of intimacy from those around me, but within myself. And that was a very scary place to be. That was my breakdown.
Wow. Yeah. Why do you imagine people are afraid of that intimacy?
Well, it's hard to speak for other people, but I can give you my story.
Yeah.
When I was younger, we have a very tight family unit, and we still do. Thank God, God bless. But my parents, my dad had an affair with my mom. I went through the trauma at age 12 or 13. At that time of my life, my parents were very kind of being emotionally dramatic. It was a very tough situation. I don't think they were trained how to deal with their emotions and how to communicate appropriately. They were just doing the best they could. And then here are me, and I have just a younger sister who's 5 years younger. So a 12-year-old and a 7-year-old at this time. And so I was not only babysitting my parents, hiding phones, taking their keys away so they wouldn't get drunk and drive away or do something stupid like that. So I'm playing babysitter to my parents at age 12, which no 12-year-old has the ability, the emotional capacity to do that. But then I'm trying to console my younger sister who has no idea what's going on. And I'm trying to tell her everything will be okay, right? Yeah. When I have no fucking clue what's going on, and will everything be okay? I was scared, quite honestly. I was scared. I think what had happened that I saw, well, this is what, raw emotions bring, right? This is what intimacy looks like. This is what being emotionally close. I don't want anything to do with that. I decided in the moment that no one else is going to hurt me. I will not let anyone, so I'm not going to let anyone in. I built this perfect castle around my heart with a little moat, and guys with swords and a little archery, and no one is going to hurt me. I was never going to be hurt like that again. So I lived 30 up to 30, the next, I don't know, do the math, almost 15, 20 years like that. I was 37 before that finally broke.
Wow.
So high school relationships, college relationships, into my 30s, relationships that probably could have blossomed into something very special. I've had multiple girls that were in love with me, admittedly in love with me. And I would get to that point where, you kind of have to jump, take the leap of faith with someone, and I would just turn it around, drop it.
Yeah.
And because I didn't know how to deal with that myself, I had to compensate somehow. So my ego would compensate by accomplishment, achievement. I always got love like that when I was a kid. Perfect, never missed a day of school, straight A's. My family, although we knew that we were loved, we were not. There was no expression of love. We didn't start saying that I love you to each other until like 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
Yeah,
it was in my 30s. It's wild.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So the only time I got any sense of love is, Casey got straight A's. Good job, Casey. Pat on the back. Casey had some sort of sports achievement. That a boy. That's love, especially for a child. That's just what I knew, right? So anytime I got uncomfortable, anytime emotions made me uncomfortable, I'm going to achieve something. So I have this list of hobbies and achievements, accomplishment. I'm a pilot. I'm a sailor. I flip homes. I am a professional clinician. I've owned just about every kind of car you've had, several boats, this, that, and the other, everything that says, hey, look at me. But they all left me empty. Every single one of them were never enough. That would be my biggest demise, and what would ultimately start my greatest journey.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. It's making me emotional. I imagine you are really deeply in your heart when you're sharing that, and I can feel it. And I'm really grateful because you can see the work that you've done to open up, or at least I imagine I can see it. I can experience it because of how emotional I am getting listening to you speak about it. And it's pulling out all the stories in me of the things that I've experienced that are similar to that. And so this is one of those experiences of life. I feel more alive right now because of how vulnerably you shared, because I'm open to experiencing that level of vulnerability. And I'm pointing that out because I want the listener to know, like, men who are listening to this is the way.
Well, I'm absolutely in alignment with that, because I will tell you at age 39, I'm almost 40. I'll be 40 at the end of this year. I've experienced the most vulnerability in my life this year by showing up on podcasts, going to retreats. That level of vulnerability, this level of sharing, although it's been scary for me at times, quite honestly, it's made me feel more alive than I've ever been in 39 years of my life.
Same. The struggle for me is staying connected to, I found this, I'll back up. I found this level of vulnerability in Tulum with the community that's there. And it's usually associated with the spiritual woo-woo community, this type of level of authentic expression, vulnerability, openness. And at the same time, every guy that I've coached has come and, like, this is what they're seeking. This is what they're looking for, whether they're in the woo-woo or they're not. And it doesn't have to be woo-woo to do this. It's just for whatever reason that community is much more accepting. And I imagine there's other communities out there like that too that I have not totally come in contact with. But it can be hard. You meet somebody for the first time and you got to dance and see if they're open. And sometimes it can scare people. I remember I came back from Tulum and was showing up with 10 out of 10 vulnerability. Like, I was just raw. I was wide open because I'd experienced everybody else around me for 2 years expressing in that way. And I show up here on Vancouver Island and meet this group of friends at a beer fest. I show up to a beer fest. It's the first thing Taylor and I, first event we did when we landed here on the island. And there's all these people, and we connected with some. They saw us and they're like, you two look interesting. What's your story? And I start talking to this guy, and I am just being me, just authentically me, just raw, vulnerable. Halfway through the conversation, his eyes start glazing over, and he's like, I need to go home. I have a migraine. And he just fucking left. And it was really, I don't even know the word. I don't know what to express about that. It was something where I felt sad for him, but also grateful. And now that we're back here, I've been on the island for a long time, my level of openness and vulnerability has kind of stabilized back down to something, if Tulum is here and regular society's here, I'm somewhere right in the middle now. And part of me really craves being over here all the time. But then also I recognize in order to get the people over here, I got to meet them somewhere closer to where they're at. And I even do that with past friends, with family members and things like that. And to know that if I come at people who are over here with this level of vulnerability, it can really just eject them right out. They're like, well, I don't know what's going on here, but you don't interact the way anybody else does, and I don't trust it. I don't like it. I'm afraid. Goodbye. And yeah, it hits people in the fears like hard, because once you show up that way, immediately they're looking at all of the things that they're not doing. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Because vulnerability is scary, right? And I think the scariest thing to do is to look at yourself in the mirror. You can bullshit anyone else out there.
Yeah.
You can't bullshit the person in the mirror. You can try, and a lot of us do, but you can't do that. So yeah, too much too soon. It's almost like a trauma response from these people. That, whoa, I'm not ready to do that. I can't. It's scary. That's where I think, it's important for coaches. Not everyone's a good coach, but for guys like you and I, who I hope I like to consider as good coaches, to meet people where they're at. I think we can be the open door for that man or woman that's ready, because that's what these people need. You don't need too much too soon, and society has their own thoughts and opinions, which I don't necessarily agree with. But that someone that says, this is safe, you can come with me if you choose. Someone did that for me once upon a time. I'm sure someone did that for you once upon a time. Ultimately changed my life, changed your life. Right. And that's really what I want to do with my coaching, is to be that guide, that intro. I always say rising tides raise all ships. I want to be the rising tide.
I love that. The metaphor that has worked really well for me is this idea of speaking someone's language.
Yes.
So I believe everyone on the planet is capable of this level of openness, authenticity, vulnerability. And it's not even a far jump for them. It's really speaking in a way that allows them to participate. So an example of that is I was raised Catholic, and I know the Catholic religion inside and out, all the way. And because of that, I can take some of these really profound concepts of quantum reality, or connecting to our emotions, or connecting to our higher self, or connecting to even inner child stuff, like all the kind of the more spiritual woo-woo type coaching things, but I can convert that or translate it into language that makes sense to someone who has that framework. And to me, that's one of the biggest services we can do on this planet, is to like, if you're raised in any tradition, if you found yourself opening to a high degree in any kind of way, and you want to bring that back to the people that you love, the most loving thing is to speak their language as opposed to expecting them to speak yours.
Absolutely.
And if you come to them with this stuff and they're like, I don't like it, that's actually an opportunity for you to see where you can communicate better. Not a position of taking it personally, like, oh, they don't like me, or, oh, same old, that's my family, I was the black sheep. And so I can take all these narratives, if I bring back this level of vulnerability and say like, oh, that's just how they are. But in reality, I'm the one who's responsible. I'm the one who has a desire to do this. And because I have that desire, then it's my opportunity to meet people where they're at. And the best way to meet people where they're at is to go first with the vulnerability.
I 100% agree with that. I love that. I think that's what makes you makes you a powerful coach. I think what makes you a powerful man is your ability to do that. You've done that with me personally on more than one occasion. And it's been the beautiful invitation that I've always needed.
Well, of course it's mutual, my friend, because even this conversation is one of the more intimate and deep conversations I've had on the podcast, thanks to the level of work you've done and how safe I feel in our conversations together because of your courage and willingness to go there yourself. It's so obvious how much you've stepped in all the way on this work too, and are inviting others. Like you said, you have all these accolades that are actually very impressive, And I'm curious, what's the accolade that you're most impressed by at this current stage for yourself?
I think honestly, the commitment and the consistency to my healing and growth journey. I've done a lot of cool things. Yeah. I've got plaques on the walls. That's cool. Don't get me wrong. I love my hobbies and I think they're neat.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I enjoy doing most of them still. But the most important one is this work, this level of vulnerability, of courage. It's changed me for the better. Yeah. I've completely changed. I'm still Casey. I'm still the fun, lovable Casey that most people know. But there is so much more depth and connection and softness to me. And it wasn't about me achieving or becoming anything. Looking back on it now, this has all just been a revealing. This is the inner child in me since I was, I imagine, 4, 5, 6 years old. That's been waiting for me for a long time. And I think I use this analogy that it wasn't me finding little Casey and walking him home. It was little Casey finding me.
Wow.
And then walking home together.
It brings up what feeling? Gratitude, love, happy for me to keep connecting deeper. You know, I'm on this podcast and I share all of these things, and at the same time I feel like this game just never ends. And the deeper I go on the healing, the more there is to heal. And at some point I try to take breaks from it because it's like you can get lost in it and just there's always an infinite amount of healing. But as you talk, I'm like, oh, there's my next doorway to walk through, is actually connecting with little me. Because despite all of these moments, these intimate moments with death, I've actually had enough of them that now I've kind of found myself in a place of apathy to some degree. Where I've like actually stopped caring. And it comes in waves. But it's so interesting to me that we can go through these levels of experience. Like I've been through so many radical experiences and I still have depression. I still find myself ideating things. They're not as big, and it definitely, like, I move through it very, very quickly. But no matter the amount of healing work, there always seems to be a underlying not enough. And I've been working to tap into that lately. The my not enough story I found, which I think I shared on our coaching call. I did a coaching call with you that was fucking amazing. Mm. And it was that what's wrong with me? That's my version of not enough. And seeing it is half the battle, like finding our own like negative stories. But now that I've seen it, it's starting to unravel like all of the stuff that was behind that. And it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. Like for me, at least, there's been, the more I do the healing work, the more I'm like, sometimes it's a quick like, oh, cool, through it. And then there's other times I open a door and it's like, okay, 6 months, here we go, you know? And with this one, that's where it's at, is like, okay, I see it, but I haven't integrated it all the way to the point of like, what do I do with this shit? And I'm curious if you've had those experiences as well.
Well, can I ask you a question first?
Yeah, please.
Personal question. You said you feel like there's this kind of level of apathy, like you don't care. I don't know if I believe that because I know the man you are. So my question is, do you think it's apathy or do you think it's maybe a self-protection mechanism?
It is a self-protection mechanism when I feel into it.
Protecting you from what?
In some ways in some ways the things that I'm stepping into. I'm launching this group tonight. First night, I'm doing this group called Brothership, where it's helping men with isolation, loneliness, connecting in friendship. And holy shit,
this has been the hardest thing I've ever done. I've built tech companies and raised $5.5 million in investor funding and had 30 employees and done Temazcals and DMT and all that stuff. And for whatever reason, this particular group launching this thing has just been a bitch for me. Like it's been like I know everything what to do. I know it's so easy. It's actually like the easiest thing. I've been trained on this for 3 years now. I've run men's groups, but it's my first one I'm running entirely alone. That's actually not true. It's my first paid one I'm running entirely alone. And second, it's geared towards so many men who are really truly hurting. It's like it's for guys that really just want easy friendship, and that's something that I have not had in my life. And so yeah, it's like pulling teeth to get this thing off the ground for me. It's easy in a lot of ways. When I put it out there, people are like, yeah, I love it. I can't wait to join. For me personally, I'm like, I don't want to live anymore. I'm like, what the fuck?
Isn't it funny how we coach on the things that we need the most? There it is. This is how I know you're on the right path, because while you've done a bunch of cool shit too, I know you have.
Yeah.
This is what's hard. Yeah.
Isn't that wild? Isn't that wild?
That
I'll lead a group of guys on LSD off of a cliff on paragliders, but to just have a weekly group where we chat as friends.
That's because that shit's easy. LSD, paragliding, no big deal. Anyone can do that on the weekend. Whatever.
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly.
Right? But this is in alignment with your soul and who you are as a man. That's why the resistance. The resistance is why I know you are on the right path.
Yeah.
It is what you
I coach on that. Whenever I go into a client, I'm like, where are you feeling the most resistance? Well, let's go there.
Yep. This is the same thing happening in the mirror.
I know. So thank you for that. I got a little real-time coaching here on the pod, which is such a blessing for me. And, it doesn't make it easier. It just, the clarity is like, okay, cool. You're right. Yes, I know. Thank you. Remind myself, go again. And as I take steps, because I have been, it's like I said, I'm running it tonight. I've got guys in. I'm excited. Can't wait. But I find myself dragging my feet in every step of the way, where it's like, I need to prep for tonight's call, and I can find any excuse to do anything else right now but do that. And like those little things. And so I'm sharing this really raw because I imagine a lot of people struggle with this. And my hope is that in hearing that, while I hear from people often that they see me and the image that I project is one that I have it together and I'm super courageous and, get shit done. Behind closed doors, I'm fucking crumbling to pieces sometimes. Not all the time, but for sure. It's like,
sure.
There are many times where I'm like, what do I do? What the fuck is going on? Where do I go? And I just like go for a walk in nature. And I'm like, well, this was not productive at all, but whatever,
Or was it? Or was it? What if all these things have to happen, right? Because these are each little dominoes. You need to be like, oh, fuck, what do? I need to go for a walk in nature. Oh, fuck, I didn't get anything done. Or did you? Or did you just conquer a little bit more of fear there? You had a little bit of courage. You had the vulnerability to be like, I don't have it together. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I'm scared.
Yeah. Yeah, the one thing I give myself credit on these days is I don't eject out. I've done I've started 10 businesses at this point in my life. A few of them have been successful. Most of them haven't, because most of them, when I hit a certain level, like right now, I make it mean something. I'm like, oh, not meant to do this. Not meant to do it. And it's such a bullshit. It's utter bullshit. I've talked about this on the podcast many times. That statement, I'm not meant to, that's my number one indicator. That's my internal red flag now of like, oh, that's where I'm going. If that thought of, am I meant to do this? I'm like, yep.
Well, I think we can kind of tie in our earlier conversation.
Yeah.
So failure like death, death like failure, it has this negative connotation in society. Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Because I will tell you, and you know this from experience, so do I. I've learned much more from my failures than I ever have from my
100%.
successes. My
100%.
failures made me into the man I am today, not my successes. It's funny, funny how that works, right? It's backwards.
It's amazing that it works that way, and the more we can like lean in on that, the easier I think life becomes, the more enjoyable life becomes. But I'm so grateful we're on this topic of death, because like I mentioned, I was at my grandpa's funeral, and this man had a lot of people there. He was like 89, and still the whole place was packed. And to me, knowing that probably 70% of his friends have already passed away, he was the last remaining member of his family, even alive, like his siblings, parents, all of that kind of stuff. So to know that a massive chunk of people who would have liked to have been there have already gone, and how many people still showed up, to me was like, oh man, this man did some shit in his life. He really did some shit. And I was inventorying on my hands how many people would show up at my funeral if I were to pass tomorrow. I got to be honest, it wouldn't be a very big number. I mean, maybe some of the people that I've impacted that I don't know, but these people that were there were ones that I knew my grandpa had impacted, and he knew he had impacted them. It wasn't like some randos that I'm like, oh, well, I'm glad that my message on the podcast got to this person so much that they would show up to be there.
Well,
this is about that relationship piece, you know?
Listen, you brought up a great point. You know, we talk about the accomplishments. That's great. You can have the house, the car, the boat, the blah, blah, blah. You can have all the money in the world. You don't get to take it with you, right?
Yeah,
you know
100%.
what stays though? The memories you created and the memories you share with other people. Like the lives
100%.
you touch, the lives you impact, those live on.
Yeah.
That is what life is about.
You know, during his wake, he was a member of this group called the Knights of Columbus, which they're a Christian group, philanthropy group.
Mm-hmm.
And he had put in so much work on this group that during the wake, 3 of them show up in full guard with swords and everything, and they have a chalice that they've engraved his name on, and they present the chalice to him and then to the group, saying that it will be used in Catholic ceremony for the rest of time. And while I'm not Catholic anymore, that act to me was really amazing. And then one of them stood guard by his casket for the whole day, like just stood there with his sword and like guarded his casket. And it made me so emotional. Like I started crying immediately when I saw that.
Wow.
Because I was like, it hit me in the deep, like masculine ideals that I feel have passed society by, that old chivalry, that old brotherhood, that old loyalty, that old knighthood, you know, like it really landed in that. And this is an organization that he gave his time and energy to. They didn't pay him to be a part of it. He paid to be a part of it.
Uh-huh.
And he was honored deeply in it. And that was another thing that hit me, where I was like, fuck, I won't have anybody standing with a sword by my casket right now, given what I've put into the earth. And so like, it's just a deeper realization of what's truly important. It's like, well, why did that happen? Because he gave deeply. He gave. It was generosity, his time, energy, love, commitment to something that didn't pay back to him until he died. You know, I mean, it paid back to him plenty of ways in the moment for getting to receive the experience. You know, when we give, when we are generous, that's often more fulfilling for us than receiving. But man, that little act really affected everybody at the wake. Every single person, when they came in and they did their whole salute and they like did the swords, all of that kind of stuff. And it wasn't military. It was some group that he had joined. I was like, fuck, I want that so bad.
It's powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it speaks to what's meaningful. It speaks to what truly matters.
Yeah, absolutely does. Absolutely.
It's like if you were to feel in right now, if you were to pass away today, what would be your legacy? And that question goes out to everybody who's listening right now. Who's showing up at your funeral? How are they showing up to your funeral? Because my dad told the story of my grandpa's sister who had passed away about a month or two previously. There were like 6 people at her funeral. And that doesn't mean that she was a bad person at all. It doesn't mean anything. It just, she didn't affect a lot of people in a way that they were, at least towards the end of her life, in a way that had them showing up.
It begs the question, are we living life in a meaningful way?
That's what came through. That's what came through, is what this man had created was he had given himself all the way to family and to his friends and to the community. He was the mayor of the city he lived in. He was on boards of all sorts of different things. These all came from just applying himself. You don't you can go today and participate in government if you want to. You can go today and participate in a community board today. You can go today and join a philanthropic group. It actually really will only happen today. It's like, you got to do it now.
Well, it's never too late, right? That was going to be my next point. It's never too late. We can always start today. You're right. Today. Yeah. The only time it's too late is when that timer on the back of our head runs out. Then it's too late.
Yeah.
Right? Again, what are we doing with today? What are we doing with the moment? Are you making the moment count?
Yeah. Yeah. And so this connection to death, to me, that's the gift of it, is it's permission to live, really, more than anything else.
I think that's a really beautiful way to put that, permission to live.
Yeah.
You know, that's what everyone says on their deathbed, right? Oh, I wish I would have done more of this. I wish I would have applied myself. I wish I wouldn't have been afraid of this. Think of every reason under the sun. But what would happen if today someone listened to this podcast and then today they decided, I give myself permission to live? What would you do? Yeah. What would you do different tomorrow than you did yesterday? Right?
What would you do? I'm going to put that question to you.
I love that question. Keep going bigger. Keep giving myself as much as I can. More so than I'm doing now. I catch myself. Let me be very vulnerable. That I catch myself in my own comfort sometimes. So, coaching is my passion and my fulfillment. But I still work part-time as a cardiovascular perfusionist. That provides me a very comfortable lifestyle, right? And so some days it's easy for me to come home and do nothing. Because I don't have to. And I'm not saying don't enjoy yourself. Please enjoy yourself. Enjoy your life. Be with your people. Right? But I think our creator, God, universe, whatever you believe in, our creator has given us talents, God-given talents. Yeah. The worst thing we could do is to not utilize those God-given talents in our purpose of life. I believe I've found my purpose and my talent, my fulfillment in this brand of wisdom, enthusiasm, charisma that we call coaching, right? So what would I do? Like, I need to go all in. I need to touch more lives. I need to put myself out there more. I need to make sure people can find me. The people that need me can find me.
Yeah.
Great. And now I thought I was going to have a nice little relaxing evening, but now I'm going to have to go make some social media posts and plan my next retreat.
There you go. Get to work.
That's good work though, right? That's meaningful work.
It's meaningful.
Maybe we should, we could all find what that is in us. What is our meaningful work? And maybe, for some people like you and I, it's coaching, it's planning retreats. Maybe it's being a good partner, a good husband or wife, a good father or mother, a family member, whatever that is. But to find that, grow into that.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my experiences of surrendering into death was pretty recent, still around gut stuff, still around food and all of that. And I was like, fuck, this might be it. And I had not launched my podcast with Chris Arnold. It was the episode number 7, I think, where he shares about his experience with benzos and the benzo
Powerful
withdrawal.
episode.
I was like, what do I need to, if I'm going to die, what do I need to do before I kick the bucket? And I was like, I have to get that episode out at all costs. And so I was in like 9 out of 10 stabbing pain. And I was like, I'm making damn sure that episode gets out no matter what the fuck happens. And I did. And then the pain went away. It was fucking awesome.
Have you ever thought about this? What if your near-death experiences have just been the little nudges that you needed?
100%. I've definitely thought of that. And my hesitancy to call them that on the podcast kind of like diminishes how intense they are in the moment, because it's like things that everybody I know around me would go to the hospital when they are feeling this way. And so it's from an ego perspective. I want to really like own how badass I feel like I am, because in those moments I'm like, okay, God, we're doing this. I'm ready. Let's go. And like, sometimes I'm scared as fuck. I'm like, God, I don't want to go, but okay, if this is it, I'm going. And then like inevitably that opens a conversation, and God asked me, do you want to? I'm like, no, I don't. And I was like, why not? And I'm like, I got more to do. God's like, what do you have to do? What is that? And like, I can put out all of these little things, and ultimately there's a little like that thing that I've been procrastinating on, putting that episode out, getting more guests. Cause at that point I had not invited any more guests to the podcast. So I had like done this whole big launch and then was like, I don't want to keep doing this. This is so fucking hard to do. And like, I'm putting myself out so raw. So I finished the episode and then immediately booked my next guest. And it was like, that's what I needed to do. And now it's Brothership, my group. You know, if you were to ask me, what is the thing I have to do to live a more fulfilled life right now? Like, what is that thing? It's putting myself out even more vulnerably to ask guys to come in, because a lot of us men have friendship wounds. I've been betrayed by so many friends in my life where I was like, thought they were my closest friend, and then they do some fucked up shit. I've told stories of that on the pod where like I had a super close friend who blackmailed me and sent my porn to like everybody around. That shit hurts. But if I look inside, can I see where I've betrayed people too? 100%. And so it's like recognizing that when guys say no to friendship, it's not because they're rejecting me. It's because they are afraid of getting hurt like they have in the past. So many guys have these walls up where they're like, I'll open, but it's going to take a lot of time. You got to come at it just this right way. I was on a call with a guy and he was talking about all the things that one of his friends had done wrong and how he'd hurt him and all these kinds of things. And I'm like, so are you guys friends? He's like, well, no, my friends don't do this to me. And I was like, no, real friends look at that and go, okay, you hurt me. Here's why. Here's how. Do we want to stay friends? It's not run right when that happens. It's the same as a marriage, you know, like if you're dating somebody and then they don't have permission to hurt you, like we treat our friends that way. Like these days, at least I have. I've treated guys in my life where I'm like, oh, well, I'm friends with you until you fuck up. And then if you fuck up, how dare you? Blah, blah, blah. My friends don't do that. And it's like, no, that's not the game at all. The game is like, hey, you fucked up. You hurt me. Here's how you hurt me. Do you want to heal that? And if they're like, yeah, I'm sorry. And you're like, cool, let's be friends.
Yeah. Well, because you're being vulnerable in the moment and you're being communicative in the moment and you're offering them an opportunity to be vulnerable in their wrongdoing, let's say, which that creates connection, doesn't it? And I think that's probably the biggest thing plaguing men today is connection. I think, was it you that shared the stat with me that 1 in 4 men don't have any close friends?
Have zero close friends.
That's astonishing. I also think that's scary. Did
you know that isolation is the single biggest factor in all-cause mortality, period? Exercise, diet, sleep, all those things are secondary to isolation.
We are pack creatures. We are not meant to be alone. It is unhealthy for us to be alone.
I was listening to an Aubrey Marcus podcast with a physicist, and he was talking about how our bodies are not what we think they are. They are a collection of like 7 trillion cells. So we are a community of different bacteria and cells and various things. That's what we are. We are a community.
Yes.
What is cancer? Cancer is a cell that has isolated itself from the community.
Yep.
So what is a human being who has isolated themselves from the collective body, the humanity? They act like a cancer. They're very survival focused at all costs, no matter what is going on around. They are not giving themselves to something bigger. They are in their own field, completely cut off from everything else that's happening. I am so guilty of this. The reason I'm so drawn to doing this work is I have been like this for most of my life. And so that's why it's calling me into doing it now. It's like, okay, am I going to step up and stop being isolated on my island?
How do you think we got here? Because it's guys of different walks of life, guys like you, guys like me, completely different stories, whatever.
Yeah.
But we're both on that isolation, that lone wolf path until, thank God, we hit our breaking point. We hit our bottom. Had I not done that, though, I wouldn't be any different and just as miserable. I might not even be alive. I don't know.
For sure.
I don't know.
For sure.
But how do we get there? And what's the fear? I don't know if fear is the right word, but there's this hesitancy with this vulnerability in close connection with other men, like we're having now. I think I don't want to say we're not the norm, but we're probably a little shifted away from it. I don't think most guys are willing to have vulnerable conversations like this. Maybe they are. Hopefully I'm wrong. But in my experience, it's very superficial in the communication.
Drinking buddies, not close friends.
Yeah. You know? Where did we go wrong, and why the fear? Why the fear from this?
That's a great question. And I think we've already addressed it to some degree when you talked about the hurt that happened early on for you. Mm-hmm. A lot of us, I imagine most people, if not everybody, has experienced some form of childhood wounding that said connection's unsafe. But at a deeper level, I think some of it comes from our fathers as men. Our fathers did not connect with us deeply, and we experienced the level of intimacy with them as a mirror or blueprint for how we're supposed to be with all men. And I've heard many reasons why that's the case. Like some of it's thanks to the Industrial Revolution, where the dad was taken out of the house and he was put into a factory and worked 9 to 5, and then came home and was tired and exhausted, so he'd just eat his dinner and go to bed. And so many of us have gone through that generationally, where we don't get to connect with dad. Dad's just the provider who comes home from work after he's been away, whereas in tribal societies, the children are off hunting with dad. They're off doing the things with the men. And so there's like a family disconnect at a very early age that I would argue has a significant role in it. And then, this level of wounding that we have around getting hurt. For me, I have a lot of history of boys, especially in childhood, bullying me or betraying me. So of course, then I come to associate guys that way. Mm-hmm. So I remember I met this kid. I had this group of kids when I was 6 years old. I show up for the first time. I come to this new house and I move in, go to this playground, and I'm so excited to connect with all the new boys there. And the first boy I walk up to punched me in the face. And so I'm like it's jarring. It was like, what in the fuck? Holy shit. That is not what you expect to happen as a 6-year-old showing up ready to play. And then immediately, of course that sets off a chain of events in my life that meeting new guys is like, are you going to punch me in the face? Of course not. But that's the inner child part that still has that wall up. So I'm curious, what about for you?
I think very similar to what you're talking about. I think there's that kind of familial disconnect and some sort of wounding, which I think ultimately leads to a fear of intimacy. And I can say that it's very true in myself. Not only intimacy with a partner, but intimacy and vulnerability with anyone and everyone, especially men. You know what I mean? Yeah. I've kind of learned to work through some of that intimacy with women to a certain degree, but with men, it's always been superficial. Until I started doing this work. And then even when I started doing this work, it was only because I was at my lowest of lows. I hit the rock bottom and I didn't have any other choice but to go down this road, which I think in a way gave me the courage to start this journey, to go on this road, to be vulnerable. You know, and I think I've had good people in my life, good coaches in my life that have created safe space. And, you know, I've connected to guys like you that create the safe space where I can continue that journey. But, you know, it took me 37 years to get here, you know, 39 really, if I'm not done healing, I'm not done growing yet.
Well, so we've opened up a lot here, and I'm curious, I would love to help bring the listener home. And I want to circle back to the medical industry.
Sure.
And how do we heal with the medical industry? What a big question to ask, you know, just drop that one right there. But yeah, I mean, we never really closed that button there. You know, you were classically trained, you're in hospitals, but at the same time, I experience you as empathizing with my story of like, hey man, like this was not working for me. What would you say is the necessary step for somebody in that?
Well, I think there's kind of a couple different approaches. I think first we have to be very objective of what healthcare is today, right? It's a business, period.
Yeah.
It runs, operates, it's efficient like a business. They're here to make money.
Yeah.
Sorry. There are providers, clinicians that are very empathetic. I think myself is one, but don't get me wrong, like I'm dependent on that paycheck too. So I think objectively understand it's like a business, right? It's not that all doctors are bad. They're very good people in the field. And again, I hope I'm one of them, right?
Yeah.
But understand, you know, the classical training is if X then Y, if this then this. That doesn't teach root causes. It teaches you how to fix the symptom, but not root causes. And that goes hand in hand with the business model because it's seats in, seats out, right? And we're all just a number in this bigger cog that is the healthcare system, for better or worse. I don't love it. It is what it is.
Yeah.
The second thing, I think, and this is kind of a broader life lesson, that I would encourage everyone to lead their life with curiosity in everything they do. Get rid of the judgment that we place on ourselves, that we place on other people, other things in our life. Be curious about everything. As it pertains to your life and in medicine, curious. Why is this happening, right?
Yeah.
What could be the cause of it? Explore yourself. We have access to all of the human knowledge in the world at our fingertips.
Yep.
You can Google it, you can search it, and not just, you know, oh, well, WebMD said it's this. So it's not that's very short-sighted. That's very naive. And listen, you can go to a doctor, but they're just going to know surface level symptoms, right? They don't know how you feel. They don't know how I feel. Only you know those symptoms, what you are feeling. To learn how to trust your instinct, to trust your body is I think one of the most profound skills that I think we all should learn. I think it should be necessary. And there are probably several ways to get there, but learn to trust your body. To instinctually, your body knows how to heal itself. Your heart, your mind knows how to heal itself, but you have to trust it and not overpower it with your ego or your mind. So leaning into that curiosity of things it could be. What is my body saying? What is my body feeling? What does my body need right now? What do I need? Maybe it's not my body that's the problem. Maybe it's my spirit. Maybe it's my soul that's actually hurt. And the symptoms are just manifesting in the body because the body keeps score, right? We can treat, you know, the superficial things that are happening. But only you can find that root cause of what's going on. Be curious about that. Dig into that. And then lastly, give yourself grace. You know, life's tough enough. We're all trying to do, for the most part, we're all trying to do the best we can. And some of us sometimes do really well, and some of us sometimes we don't. You know, we all fail. Failure's not bad. It's just part of the process. So give yourself grace in this process. Grace to be right, grace to be wrong, grace to get it right, grace to get it wrong. It's all part of the bigger journey.
Yeah. That was so beautifully stated. And I want to lean in just for a quick moment on one of the things you talked about, which was listening to the body and the grace piece. Like, they're both really good because sometimes we punish ourselves for getting sick or for not feeling well.
Yeah.
For things like, it's so crazy. And it's like the body's just, I heard a story when I was going through my healing journey in Tulum where I had not spoken to a doctor, but was going through all this stuff. And I was at a cafe and overheard a guy talking, which is really crazy. And he was like, the Inuit people, whenever the body is sick, they get very, it's a very sacred moment for the tribe, because what they believe is that the body is always striving for equilibrium. And so the body is actually allowing itself to be sick so that the soul can learn a particular lesson. And so they get very excited and interested in what the lesson is that the soul is trying to learn at that particular point in time. And they trust deeply that as soon as the soul learns the lesson, the body will resolve the illness very quickly. And so I heard that and I was like, fuck, that's exactly what I'm doing here. And so for 2 years, that's how long it took for me to learn the lesson. But it was, at this point, the greatest gift I've received was that 2-year journey. And it took a lot of patience. You know, in the Western world, the reason that medicine has become a business, so to speak, in a lot of ways is because we expect a quick fix. And so people have gotten very good at going, okay, you want a quick fix? Here's a pill.
Yep.
It's going to cause all these other things. It's not addressing this, but that thing that you're like, that pain or that feeling or whatever that you want resolved immediately, it will do that for you.
Yep.
And it does.
Yep.
And in reality, that pain or that feeling is the body telling you something that needs to be expressed, something that needs to be felt or looked at deeply.
Yes.
And yes, sometimes if we have not been looking or listening, the body will get very loud. And once the point it's very loud, sometimes it is dramatic. Sometimes it is urgent. Sometimes you do have to go to a Western doctor because people do have heart attacks. Well, that is the body screaming very loudly that something needs to change.
Yep.
And your soul has a lesson that it's trying to learn. And the faster you learn it, the better your odds of moving through that quickly come. And, you know, one of the worst things about COVID was that it not only exacerbated the isolation. That was going to be my other answer to the isolation question you had, was really COVID and social media. It exacerbated that to a high degree, but it also taught people even deeper to not trust their bodies.
Yeah.
That was the narrative that was being put out really, really strongly.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love what you're saying, because the truth is you can trust your body, and the deeper you listen, the more that becomes true for yourself. And the more you give yourself grace, the more you realize when you're not punishing yourself and holding yourself back and blaming and all these things, your body does move through these things very efficiently.
Yep.
And oftentimes us needing, like, I don't take pain meds. When I'm experiencing pain, I go, okay, let me feel that all the way. Sometimes it fucking sucks. Sometimes it is really hard to stay focused when that's happening. And at the same time, numbing it to me is like one of the worst things I can possibly do.
Yeah,
And
you're
so,
just prolonging the discomfort or prolonging the state that you're in, ultimately.
Yeah. And the resolution of this 2-year thing was I found all of this grief that I had unprocessed. Like, that was what was at the root. And I believe grief is stored in the gut oftentimes. And so that was it. And of course, if I had gone the Western route, I wouldn't have processed that grief, and it'd still be there and metastasized into some other form of illness later on in life. Mm-hmm. So I feel super blessed for it, and still working with it, but it's mainly cleared up. So I feel grateful that we went into this, and I don't know if anything came up for you from hearing that. Like, if you wanted to add I don't want to have the last word. I want to let you have the last word here on it.
Well, I total support of kind of what you're saying, and kind of just to repeat what I said, is the curiosity and the grace for that. Trust yourself, to trust your body. We are all all integrated in a bigger picture of things. And I think it's easy to forget that. Western medicine, I think, easily forgets that we are all connected to something bigger.
Yeah.
And I really believe that we can trust that. What if we can trust that, right? Trust that everything will be okay. Trust that everything will be taken care of. That doesn't mean we don't have bad days, because bad days are part of the process. It doesn't mean that death is ignored, because death happens too, just as we talked about, right? But it's really just tapping into that's something bigger than us, that's something greater than us, and trusting that.
I think that is the single most effective way to sit with the fear of dying.
Yeah.
When you really cultivate that trust, and that's the other gift of death, is it allows you to cultivate that trust if you choose to.
Yeah.
And the more you learn to trust that and to know that you are guided and protected, the more death does not have a hold, because it's like, okay, well, if I'm going, beautiful, I'm going to be guided and protected in that. And if I'm staying, I'm going to be guided and protected in that.
And on the other side of that trust is freedom.
Bingo. What a beautiful button. Casey, this has been a gorgeous conversation. I'm so grateful. Very intimate, very, very hard for life. And I would love to know, how can the listener connect with you? I imagine there are listeners out there that would love to connect with you.
Yeah, if you want to connect with me, I've got a website, CaseyErvin.com, or probably the easiest place to find me is on Instagram, Casey.Ervin, Ervin. I'll be there.
And what ways would you like the listener to connect with you?
You know what? Get on Instagram, send me a DM, tell me you heard the show. Tell me you joined Scott's Brotherhood, his men's group. You'll find me there too. Just send me a DM. Just say hi, or just say if there's anything I can help you with, let me know. Or just a thumbs up would work too. I'll take it all.
Casey's very humble. I'm going to plug his coaching for him, which is the thing that he was even saying he needs to step into deeper here. I have received coaching from Casey, and it was fucking phenomenal. 10 out of 10. I was very, something I had been struggling with for 4 months. We worked through on a call, and it was amazing. So I'm going to put a plug for you, Casey. Your coaching's phenomenal, and anybody who gets the opportunity to work with you is very, very blessed. So if you have been looking for men's coaching, or not men's coaching, you do both, right?
I do both, yeah.
Men and women, which I have women listeners as well. So anybody who hears Casey, this level of heart and vulnerability he brings to his coaching, and it's really, really amazing. So I'm a big fan.
Scott, I appreciate your kind words. Love you, buddies.
I love you too, brother. All right. Well, thank you for being on the Heart for Life podcast. And to the listener, thank you for joining us on another episode. We will see you next time. Have a beautiful day. Woo, brother. What a freaking episode. That was...
that was beautiful. I'm telling you, man, this is my intention. And I don't know. Yeah, it's a combination of you and me, but the places that we're